And we are live. It is Saturday night. What is up? Unknown Error, Esoteric Gold, Daniel Foster, Jay Bench. Hit that like button, guys, on your way in and on your way out. Help us get some more attention to what's going on here tonight. Well, as you know, with the Alien Scientist channel, and here we talk about advanced physics and science and how it's related to UAP and or UFOs, UAPs. So SETI is on the list of the talk today. Yes, thank you. I love that science gif. Make sure you guys are drinking pure science out there tonight. You know, grab a glass of wine, your favorite easy chair, and of course, the alien scientist talking about SETI. So I emailed Seth Shostak and the guys from SETI because I saw this. You know, I was looking up the scientists who were involved, and I reached out to a lot of these guys individually and you know, sent them all an email with the primer course. Let me find that email. Okay, so here I have a response back that I got from Seth, and I'm going to show that to you guys all right here. So Seth wrote back and said, "What the heck is entangled quantum radar?" And then he wrote back about an hour, a little bit later, and said, "Oh wait, I found it. So why is it necessary?" And so I proceeded to you know, explain to him, you know, that, you know, well, I sent him first to we'll get into some cool stuff, but I sent him first a video you can find if you type up using mirage effect to hide objects. Now this is 10-year-old video where they laid sheets of carbon nanotubes, and they were able to make things invisible. So they run some current through this, and it creates this really intense temperature differential curve, which, you know, like the hot pavement on a road, creates a mirage effect. It creates a massive mirage effect across it, and it can cloak light in certain directions and hide objects. So granted, the technology's probably advanced a lot more than that in the last 10 years, and we have no idea what the future might hold for invisibility technology. We do know that invisibility technology was studied under the ATIP program by the government. Like $22 million were put into studying a lot of this stuff, and that's just scratching the surface on what we can barely comprehend about a lot the scope of a lot of these projects. And that I know for a fact it didn't just happen with Bigelow Aerospace and ATIP. There's we know for a fact that if you guys look this up, I covered this a couple times. This is a story. There's an update from it Tuesday, September. This was just a couple months ago. Former Air Force scientist contractor was sentenced to prison for a year. You know, this is real stuff. This is very serious. This guy was an Air Force Research Laboratory scientist. You know, you can go read about the lab he worked for, read his thesis on the Wright-Patterson website and stuff. You know, I did a whole video on this and covered this. If you guys look it up, his name is Isaac Vincent Kemp. 36-year-old, you know, right around the same age as me, and he's now doing a year in jail for bringing documents home, guys. You know, so it just shows you how seriously the U.S. Air Force takes this stuff, and the government takes this stuff, and the stuff that you don't hear about. You know, everyone's talking about the Wilson leaks. Nobody's talking about, you know, the real deep science on this stuff, except for this channel. And so I gave them sort of a background. You know, I showed them that video of the invisibility, you know, talked a little bit about these new technologies like metamaterials and, you know, what we learned from these documents. You guys, I gave links to this all in the description, but Ulf Leonhardt was actually the guy. We'll get into some of this stuff in a second. Ulf Leonhardt is here's the guy that they contracted for whatever reason. He was one of the guys that was interested in doing invisibility and making invisibility cloaks. And he's the guy that, DARPA was like, all right, we're going to pick this guy. And he did the majority of the research for the ATIP report on invisibility science and, predicting what the future of invisibility science and also contracting to build some of the modern invisibility cloaks that are you won't find on YouTube unless you will find them on YouTube in probably like 10 or 15 years. But anyways, back to the whole issue of SETI and why this matters and what I wrote back to Seth Shostak. I explained that, if we go out and we look for planets, right? We look for planets that could be in the habitable zone and might house intelligent life. So we know with our limited technology where to look and how to find them, right? So if ET is out there and they can travel here, let's just assume, they're out there. They can probably find us. They probably have similar programs, and they're probably just as intelligent and good at finding habitable zones and looking for planets in those habitable zones. And so we have to assume that we could be being visited and the aliens might be employing invisibility cloaks. So why is quantum radar important? And it's a weird story about quantum radar, the short, weird life of quantum radar. Apparently, the military built or had these students from MIT who are working on this technology. They had them build a working quantum radar system. And it was just experimental. And they got so many false positives that they said, according to the program, that they shut it down because they couldn't, there couldn't possibly be this much invisible stuff just flying around out there that, it's like you just, put on the microscope and all of a sudden you're seeing that this bug's crawling all over your skin and you can't believe it for the first time or something. But I have a feeling that this was deployed and that they saw so much, when it opened up the world of invisibility through this quantum stealth detection, because there's a ton of articles you can look up on quantum radar, and it uses quantum entanglement. Go read everything you possibly can on quantum radar. I was shocked that the director of SETI had never heard of quantum radar. It's been around, I think, since 2018 at least, 19 publicly. It's just not well known about or talked about, but this is definitely the future. It's talking about Popular Mechanics article how quantum radar could completely change warfare. Well, because just as we were emerging with invisibility cloaks in our warfare technology and these things that can go invisible, we're also merging with the technology that can detect invisibility and break invisibility cloaking. And so this is potentially opening up our skies to a whole new way of looking at optical sensors and everything. So this is something that I've tried to bring up to the Galileo project and haven't really been successful in getting through to them about this. And then when they teamed up with Lou Elizondo and Mellon, I just don't know what's going on with that. And they just, open invitation from people like those, they didn't seem like scientists to me, and they didn't seem to be bringing, technical and scientific know-how and advanced physics to the table for detecting aliens and breaking invisibility cloaks. But in any case, yeah, it was cool to teach the director of SETI something about hunting aliens. I thought that was pretty cool. So SETI should also look for squeezed radio waves. These are ideal for graviton communication. How do you make squeezed radio waves? So this squeeze state stuff, I have to talk about this too, because you look up the Wilson docs, right? You find all the stuff about UFO debris, and you'll get to the Wilson documents. The real interesting stuff, as far as I'm concerned, is not in UFOs. And in fact, I started off my letter to SETI by saying that, you know, UFOs and UAPs and what, you know, people like Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon and TTSA and mainstream ufology are putting forth, and putting the garbage that they're putting out there is going to mislead people into thinking that, yes, this or no, this is not a topic worthy of scientific attention. There's no real science here. It's more of just the same. Because they haven't yet broken out of those paradigms and really dug in. Because, you know, you have the Wilson documents, and he goes to Eric Davis, and unless they dive into Eric Davis's papers and really this ATIP program and the science involved, then they're not going to kind of understand the full picture. So right in this traversable wormhole at stargates and negative energies documents, right here, this is the one that you want. Oh, geez. I don't know. That went to Northrop Grumman's website instead. So I have this document on the transversable wormhole. You can find it here on the Black Vault under the link in the description. But if you go to the end of that paper and the conclusions and stuff, he talks about this whole idea of using squeezed light, squeezed quantum vacuum generators. All right, it's in the papers. If you read through the scientific literature, it's not like a predominant theme, but it's mentioned for schemes for generating, you know, negative energy within the lab, and these squeezed vacuum generators. So one of the things I came across actually that I thought was really cool, it was on UFO Twitter, and more of that science. But let me show you this, right? Oh, pray. I'm gonna bring this back up on UFO Twitter. So check this out. This is a wave pool where they create this spout wave, a single spout, and they create different types of waves in the wave pool, and then model different types of aquatic physics environments. It's mostly for most of their research comes from wave harnessing waves for high, you know, electricity generation. You know, they test out different wave, you know, electrical wave generators. I'm not sure what they exactly you call this, but in any case, this just shows you what would happen if we create this. And this is guys, to find this, it's called flow wave, FLOWAVE, and Flow Wave Ocean Energy Research Facility. And these are called concentric waves. So it shows you different types of waves where they create like a random ocean environment in the pond. And but this concentric wave singularity, the spike wave, this one is by far just fascinating to think about what would happen if if this were quantum dots on the surface, and you were doing this, creating, you know, pumping it with these waveforms. What kind of nonlinearities that would create at that spike point. And then they also show how to create multiple spikes. The quad spike wave. Check this out. Goes 1, 2, 3, 4. Interesting, huh? But anyways, some wave research, you know, just using water waves is really you know, leading to some interesting insights in what we could possibly create in our laboratory experiments with squeezed light as we dig deeper into the black world of UAP physics. that there's been these groups working, behind the scenes to investigate a lot of this stuff. And we're just barely scratching the surface. Another thing that came up on Twitter that I wanted to bring up now and talk about it is this whole issue of UFO debris. And I keep finding more, evidence and things coming out of the woodwork. This was a fascinating interview that was done on, I don't know if I have that now. It's on UFOB's channel. Here it is. So here's a link to that video, guys. I'll definitely want to share it. I invited him on the show and sent him a link. So this guy, his UFOB on, he's UFOB on UFOB Reddit on Twitter, and he posted this video of this guy recorded this interview with this woman. She was like 72 at the time and living in Oregon. And that's how he met her, because he was manager of the Oregon MUFON network. And this woman had worked personally as a secretary, one of the main secretaries at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in the early 50s. She was right in the right office that would have handled all the material command stuff and all the scientific, research that being done out of Wright Army Airfield. It wasn't Wright-Patterson Air Force Base at the time. The Air Force wasn't even created when she was working there. So she was there during Roswell, and she claims in this remarkable snippet interview, guys, that she handled a piece of this metamaterial that we've been talking about and sought after, which we're going to get into these some ideas about what this metamaterial, what this material might be. Not the metamaterial, the memory foil.
And he walked in, and they always like to rag me because they couldn't figure me out. And he threw it on my desk, and it was a piece. Well, it was a piece that's about this big, and it was
about half of about size of a business card.
Yeah, about that size, and a half of this.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was bent like this. And he says, "June, you're a good wrecker. Tear that thing apart. Break that up." And I took it and I bent it and I twisted it and I laid it back down, and it got right back to the same shape. I got my desk. He says, cut it, try cutting it. I got on my desk, I got my scissors out and I snipped at it, and there was no way I could even cut that piece of metal. And it was as light as a feather. I had it in my hand, and I would say that it didn't weigh as much as these two cards. It wasn't that heavy. It was so light, but strong, and it was about, the thickness would be about, say, there's no more. It would be about that thick.
So it's fairly thick, but it doesn't weigh anything.
But it had no weight at all. It was like a feather, and so strong it was sort of a grayish gunmetal type of color. And you could see that on the inside there was there was coating on the outside. Both sides of it was the same, and the inside seemed to have a sort of a light lead colored center to it.
What were the edges of this like? Were they even, or was it like part of something else?
It was even. It was all even. And I said, "What is it?" He said, "It's a piece of spaceship." When I got through with it and I couldn't do nothing with it, I said, "Well, what is it?" And he says, "Piece of a spaceship." I said, "I just come back from New Mexico and I brought it." See, he had no business having it in the first place.
Yeah, so people opened their mouths to her. Apparently, this is James E. Clarkson, the June Crane story. I'll post that in the chat right now so people can go and look that up and hopefully find that video if they're interested in digging into this a bit more. The guy James Clarkson gives a whole background in this interview right here, and he says this woman approached him or he actually found her out or something, and she didn't want to talk to him years ago. And then she came back and approached him when she was older and said, "Listen, I got a whole bunch of stuff I want to tell you." And she's proceeded to, just unload all these documents and information on him. Said that, she was the personal secretary, that there was, she did receive word of I think there's a more complete audio clip with her on this interview here. And this guy had done a number of interviews with her, but he's a police officer from Oregon, a former police officer turned, detective investigator for UFO related stuff, and really interesting story. But back to the terahertz and metamaterial stuff. So we know that terahertz is serious business. We showed about Isaac Kemp story, that the Wright State University student who belonged to the terahertz and ultra fast photonics lab over at Wright State. Ultra fast photonics. Yeah, so we knew that he was bringing documents home, that those documents were serious enough in nature that they went after him. And there's the website if people want to go check that out and get acquainted with some of the classified research that is going on with UAP that's, come out through leaks, because nothing's really secret anymore. All they can do is obscure it and cover it with muddy the water and cover it with a lot of other nonsense. But science is, a great tool for sifting through a lot of nonsense, and that's our best friend right now. So that react to terahertz. So both of these guys are talking about similar technologies, but there's different means to an ends. And there's a reason that, everyone has heard about the Sal Pais, patents on this stuff. So Sal Pais, I think, had some good ideas. Definitely the Navy wanted to research this stuff, and they also wanted to make it public, but not really get too much into the details of the physics of how it works. And that, it's a sketchy subject, because it's like, yeah, definitely, man. Thank you for the $20 super chat, Morgan Nowlin. That's much appreciated, man. I haven't had a super chat in a while. It's good $20, man. Thank you. This beer is on you. He says he shared this with his Yale scientist ex-girlfriend. Everyone deserves to know, and I just want to be a small part of it. Yes, we need to share more of this with the scientific community, and I'm giving you guys the links to, the homework assignment to give them. Say, hey, look, take it's Saturday night. Everyone's hanging out, especially all your science friends. Maybe there's some scientists at a party. Bring this up. I don't know. Got some. Whoever's watching, this is, I'm trying to give people a good homework, assignments. So this traversable, wormholes, this 43-page paper, there's plenty of real science to dig into here with what was released just through the ATIP program. And now, before ATIP, ATIP came out, and this was all like declassified and brought public from like 2018, 2019. Everyone found out about it and started filing FOIAs. Those are Freedom of Information Act requests. And all this information has just poured out of these government programs in the last 3 to 4 years. But I have to say, I think a lot of this maybe, it may go even deeper than we suspect. I don't want to get too crazy on this channel, because we do deep research. We do. Yeah, I often get mixed up in some stuff, but this is the real deal. This Gravito-electromagnetism, this is stuff that was studied by NASA. They launched a thing called Gravity Probe B to test the frame dragging effect of the Earth as it moved through space. And we've known about gravitational drag since the 60s. And some of these scientists who we found out were connected to these programs did classified research and were into these ideas of quantum gravity and using the Einstein-Cartan gravity with torsion field tensor to basically warp the fabric of space-time via these spinning, rotating plasmas, like this Nazi Bell, stuff. I don't know. Maybe it's all rumors. I think that that's stuff that they tried and they kept classified for years, and I don't know if it had much success. I don't think that it did, because heck, we'd have these things flying around right now if it did, and the fact that we don't makes me believe that it has to do with a lot of other more complex science, which we've dug into. This terahertz metamaterial stuff is all the rage right now. And what's going on with terahertz? They're using it allegedly, and all on the surface, it looks like they're using it for these scanners that can see beneath the paint, so they can look at aircraft hull defects and stuff, and see beneath the paint with these terahertz frequency scanners. But those scanners are making use of something called surface plasmon polaritons, these, which are basically these wavelengths that resonate. Yes, get crazy in this channel, Harry Toe 10. Thank you for that super chat. We're getting crazy into this right now. I mean, this is the research that this grad student was working on, and obviously the two papers that and the research work that he was bringing home with him at night was valuable enough to send him to prison for a year and convict him for it, as a warning to others who do this type of research. Unfortunately, I don't think we have much leaks of any of that. If any of that material ever made its way to the public, I'm pretty sure that he was just bringing it home to do his work at home, and was just like not realizing what he was doing, or there's no. He was investigated for espionage and ties and all that stuff. The Air Force OSI was at his house, and then they lied about it in the papers too. But this is real stuff. Assure you, this guy's a PhD grad student, and they sent him to prison for a year over some of this stuff. So definitely, read. Make sure you share these DIRD documents, the Defense Intelligence Reference documents, that accompany all the ATIP program, or OSAP, or whatever you want to call it. This stuff's not really well talked about, and even though guys like Lou get all the attention, he didn't. I don't think he was first hands involved in a lot of the underground science that was involved in these programs. But anyways, nice, another $20 super chat from Daniel Foster. Did you have a question or something that you wanted to say, Daniel? Because I wanted to check that out. But yes, I sent this back to this link with a lot of these documents, the most important ones, and an explanation for what's in here, and sort of how to read between the lines. And I mean, this is stuff that we've talked about on this channel since 2004, because I knew a guy who worked at Area 51 named Ed Fouché, who told me about all this, who told me about quasi-crystals and metamaterials back in 2004. And he came out with that in 1998, before anyone was talking about it. The earliest references, if you go to Google Scholar, and you try to search for metamaterial, you won't find anything really before 2002. The earliest stuff I can find is like 2002, since I want a custom range, sort by date. Yeah. And I want the oldest. I want 2000, right? Let's go 1990 to 2004, right? You find a couple little things from earlier, but really no mainstream mentions of this stuff until and a lot of these are just the dates on stuff. They don't actually, the term metamaterials wasn't coined until the 90s, so you won't find anything on it before Pendry. And but anyways, the metamaterials, I've been talking about this stuff for 15 years, and now it comes out that the government's, you know, doing serious research into this stuff. But is it really related to UFO technology, or is that just the cover for a lot of really advanced scientific research? And you know, as what happens a lot of times is that, you know, scientists involved in classified programs, you know, they don't publish in mainstream journals. They publish under, you know, a private company that, you know, it doesn't really reach the mainstream. It's just held as an internal kind of report at one of these companies. No, I didn't. But these companies have the, like, you work as a scientist in these classified programs, and it's like your name doesn't exist and none of your research exists. So the aliens might as well have, you know, invented the stuff, because you're never going to get credit for it. And, you know, you just, you know, I don't know what you're doing it for. A lot of these scientists come out of these programs, and we encourage them. We've created a safe space for them at Apec. In fact, we're having the 1-year anniversary of the Apec conference on November 13th, which is next Saturday, a week from today. And that's going to be down in Hawthorne, New Jersey, at the Falcon Space headquarters. And we're going to be doing a whole bunch of anti-gravity experiments and doing interviews. Nick Cook's going to talk on his research, and we'll have some talk from more of our friends over in India who are into deciphering, you know, the manuscripts from these ancient texts that they believe were related to UAP technology in ancient history. It's just it's a cultural thing that we're exploring as well, and that, you know, that we're just learning about our humanity and our place in the solar system, really. So we encourage scientists to, you know, join in these discussions and join in this you know, program. It's we have a lot of scientists who come on and present at past Apex. We've had all kinds of people involved in different types of research, and we encourage people to contact us. And I actually invited Seth Shostak to come on, and we want more science people on to talk with our group about UAP and keep this conversation going about where the future is going. If the, you know, obviously these technologies could be used for, if we're building, we could use, they're talking about building warp drives, and they're talking about using all these advanced types of, you know, polariton condensate materials for, you know, vacuum engineering with trapped light and squeezed light and all this type of stuff, and 4-wave mixing and Project Skyvault type stuff, directed energy plasmas, and all these advanced physics concepts that people have tried and gotten lots of funding for and built, because this is just barely scratching the surface of a lot of research that it just goes way deep. And we dive into a lot of that stuff on this channel, just follow these bibliographies down rabbit holes. And there's, if scientists don't think that this topic is worthy of scientific inquiry, and SETI's seriously asking this question, like as if this is a legitimate question, then, you know, I'm sorry, man, Seth, you didn't even know about quantum radar. Like, get with the times, bro. And or either that, or, man, like, give me your job, because I would be happy to run SETI and like actually, you know, really turn things around there. In fact, are you guys hiring right now? Because, like, I'm ready to quit tile, man. Everyone wants work done for free, and it's just a waste of my talents at this point. Even though it made me enough money to survive for a long period of time, man. I need to find something else to do soon, and I would love to do this full time. This is what I nerd out about in my free time. But yeah, the quantum radar. So let's get it more on quantum radar. I want to show you guys a video on quantum radar. this one was good, but it's hard to understand him. Yeah.
नमस्कार दोस्तों, मेरा नाम है अमित। स्वागत है आप सबका इंडिया टू डिफेंस पे। मैं लेके हाजिर हूँ डिफेंस डिस्कशन का एपिसोड 30। तो इस एपिसोड में बात करने वाले हैं अब तक का सबसे मोस्ट
Oh, these are even harder to understand. Stealth 2 years ago. Yeah.
Quantum radar is a new radar detection technology that takes advantage of some quantum properties of particles. It is expected to spot stealth targets, to be hardly detectable, and to be immune to jamming, and to be small and easy to transport. I bet it does an amazing coffee too. Welcome to Millennium 7 Star, the channel that helps you make sense of military history and military technology. Using quantum entanglement for communication and identification purpose is not a new idea, and it goes back to the time when the phenomena were first tested and demonstrated experimentally. However, the research did not heat up because it was thought that the entanglement in practice was too short-lived and delicate to be of any practical use. Which is true, but laboratories around the world quietly kept researching in the USA, in Canada, in UK, in China, in Russia, and probably elsewhere, hoping to find a way to practically use quantum mechanics for detection and communication. The technology made the news when in 2016 the Chinese announced to have the prototype of an operational quantum radar with a range of about 100 kilometers. The interest for this technology suddenly spiked all around the world, despite the fact that in the West, generally the Chinese claims were considered to be an exaggeration. We have no details about the Chinese radar implementation, and the progress of other teams in the same area is not publicly known. However, there is one architecture that has been proposed in public scientific papers, and there is some consensus among the commentators that it is the most likely approach used by the Chinese and any other team. Quantum entanglement is a condition of an elementary particle, like an electron or a photon, in which the two particles are connected. In this strange world of quantum mechanics, some properties of the particles are undetermined until a measurement, which actually means an interaction, is made of the property. If we measure the value of the property of one particle, then the other entangled particle assumes immediately at a speed faster than the speed of light, a compatible property value. For a long time, the idea was just make two entangled particles, keep one close, send the other out. When the local gets its property set, you know that there was an interaction on the other side. Well, that's not how it is supposed to work. Everything started at MIT around 2008. Seth Lloyd and his colleagues were making an experiment with quantum entangled beams of light. Have a coherent light source, like a laser. Shine it through a properly shaped crystal with the proper atomic structure, and you will obtain two beams of light whose photons are actually entangled. Lloyd realized that when the two entangled photon beams interfere in a detector, the resulting detection signal should be higher than the signal produced by two totally disentangled beams. The strength of the signal depended by a property called quantum correlation, which in practice measures which percentage of the photons in the beam are actually entangled. In fact, since the light interacts with air, lenses, and so on, some of the photons will undergo quantum decoherence, which is a very cool way to say that they won't be entangled anymore. However, the higher the correlation, the higher the signal. This phenomenon was called quantum illumination, and it was verified experimentally for visible light in 2013 in various experiments in the USA and in the UK. An international group in USA, UK, and Italy brought this idea one step forward. Call one beam the idler and find a way to store it locally. call the other beam the probe, and send it out toward a potential target that reflects it. Make the reflected probe and the idler interfere in the sensor. Much of the correlation will be likely destroyed, but what remains will still produce a higher signal, which is the marker of detection. Bingo! There are obviously severe technology problems in making anything like this. Storing the idler is not simple because it is a ray of light that keeps moving at the speed of light. So you either need some fiber optics or crystals where it can bounce freely around without being absorbed or losing too much correlation. Then the probe is still light, which is absorbed by smoke, clouds, humidity, anything. So the range of detection is not going to be anything special.
Still,
To overcome these problems, the same team made another step forward. What if we do the same with photons of a longer wavelength? For example, microwaves, which would be perfect for a radar, particularly a military one. So they proposed an architecture for a quantum radar, which is believed to be the one everybody is working on. It looks like this. Build a device called electro-optomechanical converter. The converter is a contraption with two resonant cavities, one for the light and the other for the microwaves, separated by something vibrating at a nanoscale like a piezoelectric crystal or a metallic membrane. Excite the optical cavity. It will produce the idler as an output. Store the idler. The microwave produced on the other side of the converter is emitted by the radar as usual. The reflected radar echo is received by the radar as usual. The microwave is sent to the same type of converter, exciting the microwave cavity and producing light at the other end. The light produced interferes in the sensor with the idler. If there is still some correlation intact, after all of this process, even few photons, the signal will be stronger than the totally uncorrelated beams, and it will be the marker of detection. Obviously, there are plenty of technology challenges. The first being the design and the construction of the converters. As far as we know, nobody actually built one for real, but maybe the Chinese. So a quantum radar at the end
that was back in 2019. I'm pretty sure they did.
of the day should be a normal radar emitting microwaves in pulses
That's
like every
changed.
radar, but just with a very, very particular emitter and detector. The advantages of such a radar may be really impressive. First, since the detection depends from the correlation and not from the strength of the signal to noise ratio should be potentially very high. Even minuscule reflections should be detectable, which means that potentially stealth, which is designed to greatly reduce the echo, would not have any particular advantage because it will still be reflecting something. Since the radar doesn't need a big reflection, the beam can be low power and very discrete, being very difficult to detect. And in principle, nothing forbids using all the current API technologies in combination with a quantum radar. It is also very difficult to jam, if not impossible, because everything which is not correlated is basically ignored. So no external signal could fake the entanglement, at least with the current level of technology. So the quantum radar technology is amazing and revolutionary, not only for military application, but also for civilian applications, for example, in the medical field and every.
Yeah, so honestly, if it's ETs, once they figure out we're using quantum radar, they can spoof it. They could totally. We're gonna bring some people in. An artist for sure. Nick, we gotta connect the microphone. So great to have you involved in this chat. Yeah, man. So we got people that work at these bases talking about these memory foils. The memory foil, if you want to look that stuff up, I think the metallic glass is probably the closest thing we have to what that memory foil could be. There's a video on that. You can look up metallic glass and find a video on that. And we're going to try and get an expert on metallic glass on Apec. I just sent them an email today. It's actually Dan's cousin. So, yeah, guys, if you're out there, you want to join the chat, I dropped that link, and you come on and ask a question. And come on and ask a question. Yeah, there's another guy. I'm gonna mute you, Mikhail, until your audio I could hear you, but I'm just going to mute you temporarily. You want to say anything?
No, I just wanted to say I just love your channel and pretty happy to be part of it and to learn more things about the UAP and other anti-gravity technology. So yeah.
Yes, it's exciting times that we're trying to piece all this stuff together and bring it into laboratories, and
Yeah.
we're ahead of the curve right now because a lot of people think this stuff's just about the typical UFO nonsense, and we're trying to take that conversation in a different direction than the mainstream is going with it. And again, there's the materials for aerospace applications. This is stuff that I've been hypothesizing on for 15 years now, and I'm not the only one, but it's not like widely talked about. There's no documentaries about it. It's like there's no mainstream news stories about it. It's like there's a I've compared it to a modern day Manhattan Project because it's the level of secrecy surrounding these topics, or at least nobody talks about them.
No, nobody talks about them. The other thing is, most people think it's a pseudoscience, and they don't focus in it. But actually, it is a groundbreaking thing if it actually comes out into public. You can just imagine getting rid of the fossil fuel, and it just makes things so much better. But I wanted to ask you a question, Jeremy. I did you get any chance in the future to get Commander Fravor to your meetings, like in the APEC meeting or something like that, where we can get more insight account of the Tic Tac which they chased off the coast? Uh, I think Nimitz incident, I
Yeah,
believe.
I didn't interview a lot of those guys early on, and him was what's the other guy? What's that?
I
The
forgot that.
scientific. There's a UAP study group. What's the
Mhm.
guy's name? There's Tim McMillan, and what was the other guy? There was another pilot who saw this stuff. Ryan Graves, I'd try to get on. I contacted him, and he seems to not really want to talk to us.
I did contact Ryan Graves. He replied to me by mail. I wanted to take a short interview with him about what he thinks about the Tic Tac, but he said, yes, I'll let you know the time, but he never replied again. So I was like,
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of reaching out today to a lot of people that I have been meaning to get on, and I want to schedule streams for some of these people because there's one of the guys I want to get on is Brett Tingley of the Drive.
oh, yes.
So the Drive has been doing excellent reporting on a lot of these technologies, but a lot of the stuff. This guy's super knowledgeable. He put quite the report together on this. As I was just learning a little bit about these things, and this is only a year ago,
Hmm.
but it's still news to a lot of people in the scientific community. Once you start sharing some of the stuff with people, they're like, "What?" I have all the old videos with Leak Marabou. He's the guy from the scientist who started a lot of this Project Skyvault stuff. Yeah, see, you look up Lake Marabou and you'll find the videos that I posted.
The
Space
light craft.
Yes.
I wonder what happened to this project. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I want to know what happened to this project. I think it went dark after the test or something.
Yeah. After they, started trying to go commercial and mainstream, I think they were approached and bought up. And I'm pretty sure that he's got classified contracts, and I heard that he can't talk publicly until like 2027. This is a cool video, though. This is the one I
video was
wanted to show because we were talking about ways. I'd brought up that Hackaday article that let me find who'd mentioned that and asked the question about it. It might have been a while back. Oh, there's another Daniel Foster. Jeremiah, what CAD program do you guys recommend? I didn't even see that one. Sorry for that. I didn't mean to miss you. Every little bit helps, man. I will read all the super chats for sure. I can only keep up with so much of this, but yeah, there was a question about this Hackaday article too from a guy that but Jeremiah, Jeremiah's joined the technicians in the chat, by the way. So he uses render toolpath data directly from Fusion. Fusion 360. That's the answer, buddy. Todd uses it too. So that's the CAD program you guys want to use. But this Hackaday stacked materials makes kitchen temperature superconductors. So I want to talk about how we can do this in our lab, because that was the question. Can you guys make these things in your lab? Can you start building this and experimenting with it? And how cheap can you do it? Well, this
of an inert gas called argon into the chamber.
This is a
This
video.
machine right here is basically magic. Let me show you. First, I turn on two special pumps that remove basically all of the gas in this bell jar, so the environment inside is basically like being in space. Next, I flow a tiny bit of an inert gas called argon into the chamber. And finally, I arm the system and send high voltage electricity through this odd-looking cylindrical part. It stutters at first, but then a stable glowing beam of plasma forms. This plasma is hundreds of degrees, and weirder still, it's actually partially made of metal. And better yet, if we put something in that metallic beam, that object gets coated in that metal. The best part is that changing which metal becomes plasma is very easy. It uses these replaceable discs, and depending on which one I choose, it's possible to coat objects in all sorts of different materials. For example, here's a little 3D printed object. In this case, it's a Notre Dame cathedral that we printed on a resin printer. If I stick it into the machine and put a disc of silver in here, I can very easily coat the plastic in silver metal. And this would work with basically any metal and any object. Here's a hornet that we also coated in silver, or here are some flowers we coated in pure gold. You certainly can't do that with electroplating. This machine is called a magnetron, and in my opinion, it's one of the things that's as close to magic as we've ever made as a species. And it's at the heart of so many industrial processes that the world would look very different without this type of machine. On top of that, this was the most complicated machine that I've ever made, and it took two people working basically full time more than 2 months to build it. While this is no Marvel Machine X, it still had dozens of parts that needed to be machined to tight tolerances, so that everything would seal and function. It was a massive, massive challenge, but so much fun. This is actually the second video I've made about this system. In the last one, we took a deep dive into how this thing actually worked. We went section by section to explore how the different subsystems operate independently and how they work together to make a complete functioning machine. We also took it for a test drive and coded a bunch of different things. One of my favorites were these playing cards that we made using cut vinyl to form a mask and a layer of pure gold. When you pull the vinyl off, any of the uncovered areas will remain coated in gold. The details come out so crisp, and the final card looked awesome. The other one I really loved was this crow skull because the coating process really looked like we were attempting some sort of dark ritual, and the result looked surreal. It's hard to convey how much better this looks than something done with paint. Every surface detail is exactly the same, but looks as though it's simply been transmuted to a different element. It's bizarre, but I love it. In today's video, we're going to talk about how we actually built it since we mostly just focused on function last time. I have a huge amount of footage of the machining of most of this machine, though I did have a camera suddenly die at one point, so a little bit of that footage was lost to the void. This video will hopefully serve as a guide for those who want to build one of these themselves, or just want to learn about how all the pieces fit together and why we made the design choices that we did. At the end of the video, I'll show some of the experiments I'm currently doing in preparation for the final installment of this series, where we get into the much stranger functions of this amazing machine. As promised in the last video, I've put a link to a GitHub repo below with all the step files of every part of the machine. So that way, if you want to try and build one of these yourself, you've got some resources to start with and build on. But without further ado, let's jump right in. First off, where did we get our materials? Since this was the first major project we ever did in the new lab, we started off buying a lot of the stuff from a site called McMaster-Carr. That site is amazing because they basically carry any engineering material you can think of, and frankly, plenty you didn't even know existed.
Definitely gonna have to check that site out. McMaster-Carr. You guys, you can watch the rest of that video here. I'm not going to play the whole thing. I just wanted to share that for educational purposes, so that the people who are out there that are you crazy sons of bitches that are crazy enough to build one of these things and do your own sputter coating magic, you can do that. So maybe we might, ask Santa Claus to help us build one of these for Christmas, because this is definitely something cool that we could. Exactly. Yep. If you're one of those places, let's build this stuff, dude. It can't be too much, right? It can't be too much to build one of these. You're not talking, tens of thousands of dollars. I want to ask him about how much he mention how much it costs to build. They had a sponsor. So maybe we could get a sponsor to go and build one, man, Yeah, for real. Michael, I know that you could build one. I'll help you, and we can do what we have a CNC machine and a lathe and everything. We can do all the machining. Totally build one for the team. Yes, we need to introduce more people to modern science, and this is like a revolution in it, because you get a bunch of your friends together and do it yourself, man. Like, that's what I've been doing, is getting a bunch of my friends together and we just build this stuff. So yes, nanoparticles, dude. Let's sputter coat it and then quantum dot it, and we can start. Yes, guys, link up definitely, and I'm glad people are coming together on this stuff. We're gonna
Those
build one.
mechanically inclined, it's kind of like being a kid in a candy store.
Oh
But their
yes,
prices can be a little bit high for some things. So we probably
McMaster-Carr. All right, let's go there. McMaster-Carr. McMaster.com. There it is. Ooh. I'll have 12 of everything.
Me too.
What's up,
I
Nick?
just have one of everything. We'll make it a baker's dozen.
Yes, a baker's dozen. 11. Addo, what's up? I muted your mic so we could watch the video. McMaster-Carr. Guys, McMaster.com. Pulling and lifting. So the key thing was that bar stuff too. You can get the aluminum bar. Yeah, piping and tubing. Each one of these is probably like massive stuff under it. Oh yeah, look at that's just gears. Just one of those gearboxes. They got differentials. Oh, sprockets. Get your sprockets here.
Sorry, I'm just getting an email here. If you don't mind, my buddy Mike from Faraday Research joins us. He's the one that has a couple of the working over Unity devices. He can come on and try to explain.
Nice. Yeah, this was the same, guys. This was a different video, and this was from September 21st. Look at all the sputter coating stuff that
Even for the thermal evaporation, which doesn't use plasma and just wants as low of a vacuum pressure as possible, being able to flood the chamber with a bit of argon to flush out any junk is really useful. Most things are cleaned with acetone before they're coated, but acetone is a little bit sort of sticky in this context. So a flush of argon helps make it let go and get sucked out of the system. Moving on, let's talk power. The magnetron needs very high voltages, while the evaporation needs very high current. To handle both of these problems, I'm using microwave oven transformers. These are super, super dangerous and definitely need to be treated with respect. One of them is unmodified and can supply up to 2,000 volts, while the other has the secondary coil replaced with 2 turns of really thick gauge wire to supply several hundred amps. Both are controlled using a variac. This is a special type of transformer which outputs 0 to 120 volts based on where you turn the dial. This way, I can throttle the amount of power going into either system. I can also control which one is on from the control panel thanks to a few switches. What's great is that there's a lot of redundancy. To actually send any power into the system, you need to flip 4 switches in a variety of places, so you really need to be sure that you want to do it. One last thing to note is that the magnetron needs DC power to work, so the transformer is connected to a string of diodes arranged in a special diamond pattern. This is called a full bridge rectifier and takes 2 AC inputs and outputs a nice DC voltage. Alright, one more system to go and we can actually fire this up, and that is the coolant. This one is nice and simple and basically just consists of a pump, a reservoir tank, and a Peltier cooler. Silicon tubing sends water from the pump through the cooler to the various things that need cooling, like the baffle and the magnetron. But silicon tubing isn't actually good in a vacuum system, so for the tubes that run from the base plate and into the sputter head, we use Teflon. In fact, any tubing which is exposed to the high vacuum side of the system is Teflon. We only use vinyl before the diffusion pump and to connect the gas tanks to the flow controllers. With vacuum, power, gas, and cooling sorted, we can finally fire this baby up. Let's start simple with a little microscope slide. If there's any dirt or oil on the slide, it'll prevent the materials from sticking properly. So the slides are cleaned well with acetone, but this alone would be insufficient. To clean these properly, there's a whole protocol that uses really nasty chemicals to truly scrub any contaminants from the surface. But for this demo, I'm not going to bother. One thing I have been experimenting with, though, is passing the slides over the flame of a little mini Tesla coil. The plasma is full of hot reactive oxygen, and actually does a pretty good job of
Here you
burning
go,
off
Jeremiah.
contaminants, and it also charges the slide, which makes it a little more receptive to the coatings. I realize this seems like a lot of work, but it's only really necessary for glass. Other things like, say, flowers or 3D printed parts don't need it. Glass is just so unreactive that you need to treat it to make the layer stick really well. Don't get me wrong, it'll coat just fine without all this effort, but the metal adhesion layer is much stronger with this extra treatment. With the bell jar off, I first need to choose what materials I want to use. I have all these different discs of different elements and materials for the magnetron. And for the thermal system, I have these molybdenum or tungsten boats and little pellets or pieces of material or filament wires. Since there's 2 ways to coat things, there's 2 ways to load the machine. For the thermal version, I can either put a little piece of something in a boat and then suspend it between these electrodes, or for things like titanium, I can make a filament out of them, and just heat that directly by wrapping a thin wire of them between the 2 electrodes. For the magnetron, I can take a disc from my collection and load it into the sputter head. I do this by removing the ground shield, which is this outer metal piece, and exposing the core. Here there are 4 bolts and a retainer ring that hold the discs onto the sputter head. I just remove one and loosen the others, and I can slide one disc out and replace it with a new one. Since I expect to do a lot of bits of glass and things about the size of a standard microscope slide, I made the sample holder have a slot that will fit that, while leaving as much of the glass or slide exposed as possible. Microscope slides just fit right in, and once they're in place, the system can be closed up and pressurized. Once everything is running and ready to go, I'll either give it a puff of argon if I'm just going to be using the thermal system, or a flow of argon when I go to use the magnetron. Starting the magnetron is a little bit like starting a really finicky engine. It usually takes a minute to balance the voltage, gas flow, and the total amount of power going into the system to get a nice stable plasma. Too little gas or too little voltage and the plasma can't form. Too much of either and a ton of current will flow and the system will spray too much material too quickly, or you'll just roast everything that you're trying to coat because the plasma gets too hot. This is why I always start with the shutter closed. Once I've got it balanced with a nice stable plasma, then I'll open the shutter. Also, this is really helpful since the disc will develop a layer of oxides and other junk on them while they're in storage. So this is a way to shed all of that junk before exposing the thing you're actually coating, so that only clean, good material will actually be used. Using the thermal system is much simpler. If you go too hot, you'll melt the boat, and too low, and nothing will happen. So you just balance where you start to see vapor flying and just kind of stop there. Or in my case, I know that about 80 on the variac is enough for at least aluminum, so I just start there and then fine-tune it as needed. For a more even coating, I can use the motion controls to move the slide back and forth over the plasma plume. Eventually, I plan on sticking a stepper motor here so that it can just do this with the push of a button. I'm not going to get too much into how the magnetron itself works. I'll get more into that in the doing weird stuff with the magnetron video, but here's the quick version. There are 2 electrodes, the central one and the outer shell. When you put voltage across these 2, plasma will form between them. Inside the central electrode is a very strong ring magnet, which is sitting on a turned steel pole piece. If you look at a cross-section of the magnetic field this forms, you see it makes a sort of M shape. This will concentrate the plasma into 2 spots at the bottom of the M. Translated back to 3D, this forms a super hot ring of plasma on the surface of the electrode. The reason for the cooling lines that I showed earlier is to remove any excess heat from the core of the magnetron, partly so that it doesn't melt, but also so that the magnets don't get too hot, since that would ruin them. It also makes it so only the very surface of the metal is hot and the rest is much colder. As argon atoms in that super hot plasma hit the inner electrode, sort of like billiard balls, it knocks atoms free from the surface of the electrode. Those atoms go flying up at the thing you're coating, and just like steam condensing on a cold window, the atoms condense and form a layer on the thing you're coating. You can actually see the ring in some shots, but better than that, you can see this pattern left on the discs. There's a thin line where the most metal was being ablated off. This is actually called a racetrack pattern. All right, now we know how this works, how to load it, and how to run it. Let's make some stuff. In a project I did about 2 years ago, which I'll talk about a little bit later, I made these microelectrode arrays meant for growing human neurons on them. As I was filming this, I found the vinyl cutter files and figured that I should probably make a new one using the new system. Just like last time, I cut out some vinyl, masked off the areas I didn't want to be coated, and then threw it into the machine. This time I'm using pure silver instead of sterling since I don't have to use a bread plate anymore. Same as last time, I did a layer of silver, and then a layer of gold. I absolutely love that you can literally see the layer go down. It feels like magic every time I watch it happen. To finish it off, once it's all coated, the vinyl is removed to reveal the final array. This is probably about as small as the electrodes can be made using vinyl like this, so for the next neuron attempt, I'll be using proper photoresist. Another thing to note is that switching materials is a little bit slow. Before the machine can be opened, the diffusion pump needs to cool down enough so that it doesn't just ignite when you let air back in. So each layer took about an hour, from first starting the system to being able to open it again. The custom playing card was made in basically the same way. I just did gold on both sides, and then had the fun task of peeling off all the little vinyl stickers to slowly reveal the pattern. But when it was done, the final card looks absolutely stunning. If the machine didn't take so long to heat up and cool down, I would do a whole deck like this, but as it stands, this one card took about 3 hours, so that's a negatory on that one. Moving on, let's coat something a little bit more fun. This is a real crow's skull that I got on eBay. I love the contrast of the black beak and the rest of the bone, so I definitely want to keep that. I masked off the beak using some aluminum tape and then loaded the skull onto the holder with a bit of soft aluminum wire. It's hard to convey how delicate this thing is, so I took a lot of care not to break it. I went with silver as the coating material, since silver is one of the easiest materials to sputter, and frankly I just thought it would look the best in contrast to the beak. Once things were pressurized, the coating process went super smoothly, but can we just stop for a second and appreciate how freaking amazing this looks? This is what I mean by this machine is basically magic. If I were to show this to someone in, say, the 1500s, I would 100% be burned at the stake for being a witch. After it was coated, I removed the mask and it worked perfectly so that the whole thing came out looking amazing. This is going to be a great addition to my collection. All right, skulls and glass are both pretty solid. Let's try a real challenge. You've been seeing these for the whole video.
Yeah, so he does dude, this is cool stuff, dude. So we can build one of these. This is badass, guys. We have to build one now. Can we build one bigger than this though? We need a lot of more argon. How much is argon? So there's his whole setup. He's got a blower motor here that cools the magnetron. Or is that the vacuum pump? And then this is the tubes that pump the argon in to the chamber. I'm gonna have to figure this all out and go over his schematics. Build this thing. The power supply is right here, and there's that transformer thing. There's all the leads going into the. Wow, this thing's pretty intense, dude. Definitely go to the Thought Emporium. Thank you for sharing that video with us. That is awesome. Definitely sending people there to subscribe. Maglev laser table. Making holograms. I think I saw that one a couple months ago. Cool stuff. Thanks, guys. Then they also, I want to show this video. Robert Murray Smith. Go to his channel and subscribe, and he shows how to make a ball mill, a high energy ball mill. Explains the whole process, and you can use these for a different type of nanotechnology. So this is just do-it-yourself nanotechnology on the cheap.
Put some rubber on. Now I'm probably going to glue on a strip of rubber so that again when those things are tightened down, that rubber will press against this and form a seal. So that's where we are and that's what we're up to next.
This is a bit older stuff, but good stuff. Anyone have anything else they'd like to share? Mike Faraday Research.
Hey.
What's up, Mike?
How's it going?
Good,
My
man.
man Mike.
Busy week, nonstop.
The busy bee is the way to be, right?
Yeah,
Always getting something accomplished.
yeah. It's one of those weeks I had to get the snow tires on the car, so it's busy doing
Don't
that
you love
today.
being Canadian?
Oh yeah. He knows all about it, right, Bernie?
Oh yeah. Been snowing all week. I've been it's actually already frozen so cold once that the salt water jars that I still had outside all cracked and shattered. So I've been picking up all my like alchemy experiments off the ground, wintertizing. It's been fun.
Oh, it's not here yet, man. We still got like some beautiful foliage and left over, and no signs of snow yet.
Yeah, I got to become a sunbird. That's why I've been focusing on crypto 24/7 is make my way to have that Florida spot in the winter.
I've been to New York and New Jersey. I like it down there, and been to California once. So yeah, I like it down there.
So yeah, the Sal Pais patents, this PZT, I think there's an easier way to create the room temperature superconductors for that part of the patent, and I would do it with metamaterials and the squeeze states and polariton condensate, what are called polariton condensate materials, and that's what I would use. And
I know if you guys have tuned in at all, there's a channel called Tesla Tech, and there's been quite a few conferences there, like doing like premieres. And
Mike, I don't know if you've been tuning in here or not to say that, but that's
yeah.
fine.
So Steve came on my channel the other day, and I want to keep promoting him.
Yeah, I've been watching quite a few of the lectures there. Some of them are pretty cool.
Yeah, where the heck is the Tesla Tech?
A lot of the stuff was
God,
back from 2012, 2014, around that range there. So they're a few years back, but a lot of the stuff they're talking about is still very relevant. And some of the concepts are definitely good.
Here's some older interviews with Steve.
Definitely have watched some of those.
Yeah, it's older. So yeah, so Steve Ellswick now on YouTube. So yeah, this was the stream when I did fast. I started today's stream out with those same sunglasses. Let's do this. So Steve Ellswick. All right, so you guys can go to teslatech.info. I can't find his channel on like. You just find Elon Musk stuff when you type in Tesla Tech. So you go here and you click YouTube on the teslatech.info, and this will bring you to the channel. I'm gonna post they don't have enough subscribers to have like their own like link and stuff. So guys, go there and subscribe. Help him get to 1,000 subscribers. He's only at 572. Just go there and subscribe. It costs you nothing, and it helps him out a ton, so that he can post,
definitely.
He can monetize these videos and start making a little bit of money off them, because these are older stuff and they don't really sell. He said they're not really selling enough, and he wants to put them up for free to gain more interest in the newer stuff and the future conferences, because which is a good idea, because stuff's this older stuff's good history, man, and just
not only good history is some of the stuff they're talking about actually can be some clues to advanced stuff that we're working on now. Like especially even with my energy stuff that I'm working on. Like Tesla was working with spark gap, rotary spark gap, and I did some tests last night, and I'm finding more and more that there's some mysterious anomalies happening with the spark gap that are giving me excessive amounts of power in my system. And every time I add another spark gap to the equation, my potentials just go up.
Yeah.
And without putting any more power in, actually, as a matter of fact, some of the tests I did last night, when I kept adding a second or a third spark gap to the situation, my amperage decreases. So my potential going into the system is decreasing as I add more spark gaps to the situation. So I'm finding that there's more than meets the eye with the spark gap. And, Tesla was always working, mind you, back in those days, there wasn't transistors and high-speed MOSFETs and stuff like that. But, there's obviously anomalous activity happening with those spark gaps, and it's increasing the potential of my system. And another anomaly, well, actually, it's not an anomaly, it's an enhancement that the coil that I use in the system, I could actually make it smaller. So obviously there's definitely a lot more stuff I have to research with that, because the more spark gaps I add, my coil can actually get smaller. So I don't know if I'm creating some kind of a harmonic that's happening with the coil and the spark gaps. Definitely something I have to look into further. So my last test I did last night, I was able to light up a 50-watt halogen light bulb with about 15 watts of power. So I put in 15 watts, I'm getting 50 out. And my coil is, well, the length of the wire is about 8 feet. So it's about 5 turns on a 3-inch diameter tube. And, I'm getting huge gains. I'm going from 15 watts in to 50 watts out. And the bulb is completely lit up. And also the bulb went up to 200 C in temperature.
What's interesting is there's a whole section in these ATIP documents, this defense intelligence research reports on over unity and free energy devices and stuff too. So it looks like they dug into that stuff as well.
Yeah, because it goes hand in hand with the anti-gravity stuff, because you need a spark gap in the high gains in a power system to give you the effects that you need for, anti-gravity. So I really feel that anti-gravity and energy are, you can't have one without the other, right? You got to have the energy in order to produce the effects of anti-gravity.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that say like, oh, well, just if you can get free energy or whatever, then you wouldn't have to worry about anti-gravity, because you can use that energy,
Well, it's increasing the
energy is the more of the problem. A lot of people say like, oh, we'll just come back when you figure out the energy problem, because the energy is what you really need. So one of the things that I've studied and paid attention to for a number of years, which has sort of been an outcast topic as well, that sort of kind of made a recurrence, is cold fusion.
Yep.
Cold fusion now. Sorry. Now.
See, back in the days when Eugene Matlock was working on cold fusion, he was talking about all the collusion with the patent offices, and they were deliberately botching the reports to make it look like the cold fusion wasn't working when it actually was. So obviously, there's a lot of corruption in the patent offices that do not want this technology to be patented and come forth, because they want the military-industrial complex to have the edge on everybody else. And then as soon as they get all their patents in legally with the government, they'll say, okay, you guys can do what you want now, but we got all the patents.
Yeah, it's interesting. So
right?
the one of the guys I was following, I think it was George Miley, who's
George Norrie on Coast to Coast?
George Miley. So you go to Cold Fusion now and search for.
Oh yeah, you were telling me about him last time, right?
I think these are some of the guys that you should look up to. I mean, look up on Cold Fusion. If you go to Cold Fusion now and watch some of these panels, you can dive into the science of cold fusion. It's come quite a long way. Larry Forsley is the guy from the U.S. Navy labs. That's SPAWAR, and so this is like when you want to dig into research, you got to know the scientists' names in order to, that's
Right,
that's
exactly.
like the best way is remembering names and being like, oh, that guy.
That's why when I go on Bernie's show, I feel like a broken record. I say I'm doing research. I'm doing research over and over and over again. And there's a lot of reason for that because you got to know the history of some stuff because a lot of stuff from the past can give you some vital information you need for your projects to advance your projects, right? So
Yeah.
definitely like when it comes to like reading up on Eric Dollard and stuff like that to learn about what energy really is and how it works and how it reacts in certain situations and the mathematics behind it and who were the founding fathers that really advanced stuff so far that basically the global elite didn't want that to happen and suppress these people. Tesla and J.J. Thomson, and even blackmailed J.J. Thomson to admit that the electron is what electricity is, and the electron is not electricity. So, and because of that, he had to lie about it, and that was the only way he was going to get credited the Nobel Prize for the person that discovered the electron. And the electron's not electricity. Electron is the resistance in electricity. The electricity lies in the ether. And the only way you can produce energy is magnetism and a dielectricity. You cannot have one without the other. When you merge the two together, it creates energy or electrical power as we know it. But the electron is not electricity. And I will say it over and over again.
So there's a number of different energy systems that they looked up as part of the ATIP program as well. So they looked up the fusion. There was the Sal Pais fusion patent. There was also a neutronic fusion propulsion by this Dr. Teofilo of Lockheed Martin. So
there was a couple Canadian engineers that were working on this stuff called internal propulsion, where it actually used kinetic energy in like a centrifuge type thing, and it created a pulse of kinetic energy and would propel an object forward with no actual propulsion. It's a mechanical device, and they put it in a small boat, and they took it to an indoor swimming pool, turned the device on, and the boat started moving on its own. They just put this box in the middle of the boat, flipped it on, turned the motor on, and boom, this boat started going across the water without any propulsion whatsoever. It was all done to centrifugal force kinetic energy.
I think I remember seeing that at one point.
Yep. Now, stuff like that you can use in outer space because you don't have to worry about gravity anymore. You're in the void of space. So to have a device like that would work perfect because you have no resistance. See, the key is when you're in a gravity situation, you have to deal with resistance. The atmosphere, the gravitational force of the Earth, and other anomalies. But when you're in outer space in the vacuum, you do not have this resistance anymore. So that's why I'm working on this flywheel generating system, because if you use it in outer space in a vacuum, that wheel will spin forever. Well, look at the Earth. It's been spinning for 4.7 billion years, and it hasn't stopped yet. So you got to look at nature sometimes to give you the clues and how you can harness certain powers, right? And same thing goes for gravity, because the key to finding out the key of developing an anti-gravity system, you got to learn about nature first. And if you can figure out nature, you can learn how to manipulate it.
And a lot of nature is mathematics, so it really
That's
helps
right.
to build
geometry and mathematics systems.
Yeah, to build your understanding of math and how fractals will work. They're reciprocating, algorithms and repeating functions.
And
But
just to give a little idea of why we struggle with hot fusion compared to cold fusion, where cold fusion is nature and it's how it works with just the minimal amount of energy of an atom vibrating, fluctuating at its right resonant frequency and zapping in and out. Where our hot fusion, we're trying to not just take that one little atom, but every single atom around it and all of the space around it, and put the pressure to combine it all, the heat energy to combine it all, and everything to force it physically together, where it's literally the exact opposite extreme of how nature and reality actually works.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, atomic nature is certainly a strange cat. You know, it's both alive and dead, and
Yeah, see, the thing is with gravity, what makes gravity so hard to wrap your head around is the fact that we can't see it, we can't smell it, we can't touch it, but we know it's there because we can feel it in our body with the weight. We know it's there.
well,
But
there's experimental evidence that gravity exists.
exactly.
Unlike the dark matter, this whole controversy too has caused quite a big divide in a lot of physics. Physics has outcast a lot of the newer ideas, which kind of believe in this invisible UNRRA radiation bath, right?
Mhm.
And the dark matter guys say, well, this UNRRA effect isn't real, and then there's no, there's none of this, and this is just a misinterpretation. Just like it's like the old Catholic Church creating more epicycles to
Well, so you got your dogmas, right?
your dogmas and stuff. So
Yeah.
this whole idea of general relativity and how space-time is created, and I really liked the approach that Wolfram was taking in his "What is Space-Time Really?"
Yep.
That one really opened my eyes up to this whole idea of space-time as a network or a graph, using graph theory and grid theory as
I think
right?
honestly,
this is the book I grew up on. Like, I bought this in grade 10 and carried it around through high school. And it's like I structured my entire scientific thinking under his automata fractal geometry of the universe, and how it's just a system of how everything works and plays out.
Yeah, because he did that with 1D linear, a 2-bit 1D linear arrays, and
but we're getting old, Jeremy. Like, nowadays, kids have that in a computer instead of a 10,000 page freaking weapon.
You could probably knock somebody out with that book easily. I have a copy as well somewhere.
I think I actually grew muscles in high school from lugging this thing around.
It looks pretty big.
Yes. Thank you, Stephen Wolfram, by the way. I tune into Wolfram all the time on his channel. He has a lot of great knowledge to share, and is definitely a great teacher to learn.
I don't know if you guys talked about this concept of gravity. I've been kind of studying the effects of using a gyroscope. Now, when you use a gyroscope and you're spinning at a very high RPM, and you can balance it at a 45-degree angle without it toppling over. So the reason for that is you have the stored up kinetic energy, kind of like the flywheel. Okay. So what it does is it fixates itself in space. So when you have that energy radiating out, like kind of like the Faraday disk, the power will emanate from the middle axle to the outer ridge of the outer diameter of the disk. Okay, when you spin it at a high RPM. Now you get a similar effect on a gyroscope. When you spin it up to high RPM, the electrons and all the matter that is in the air now gets forced to the outer edge of that wheel. Now, when you force that potential, I'll call it potential. When you force it to the outside of the wheel, what you're now doing is creating this radial centrifugal force field around the gyroscope. And that's why Now, that counter reacts with gravity, and I really feel that there is a magnetic component to gravity. And that's why the gyroscope, when you spin it at a very high RPM, you can balance it on its end and it won't topple over, because that flux that's coming off the wheel is radiating off the wheel in all directions. Therefore, any gravity that's in that space is not going to be able to hit the wheel, because there is no other explanation why that, the gyroscope won't topple over. I've seen guys do it with 30-pound wheels, spin them up to high RPM, and
But
then
they put
balance
it on a
it.
scale and it still has the same weight,
Right, because the middle
It's just
with the
susceptible to
axis, the middle axis still is exposed to gravity. So what do you do to that middle axis of the axle? You have to eliminate it. So that means the only way you could do something like that would be like a ring. So if you get a ring and you hyper accelerate it at high RPM and you add high voltage to that, you could get an anti-gravity effect, as well as time distortion as well. So I'm looking at simple devices that would kind of demonstrate a similar kind of effect to that. You know those frisbee discs that are rings? And
So this is some math on how to calculate the moment of inertia, which is that I value, and the rotational. If you put it in terms of torque, you get this I component.
Right.
So you can calculate that for a ring, and
see, gravity will be flowing right at the axis point. Okay, so if you got a ring spinning, all right, now the field that it creates on that ring area, gravity won't have effect to it. It'll asphyxiate itself in space. Now, if the gravity is flowing through the object, like through the ring, it will not have a gravitational mass effect on the ring. Now, those frisbee discs I was telling you about that are shaped like rings, if you get them spinning really, really fast and just give it a little toss, it will actually stay in the air for a little bit. It'll almost kind of have like a helicopter effect. I know the width of it helps it stay aloft, but the concepts there, I see some similarities there to my idea. So I was trying to think about how I would build a device to test something like this. So I kind of been drawing some ideas up on.
Yeah, we're back on the idea of this. This goes back to the '60s, man. On these and the ideas of that Dewitt had, Bryce Dewitt, that I talked about on superconductors and gravitational drag, and the idea of freezing the space time and then trapping it and then rotating it to increase this effect, and it's back to an older form of gravity. So this one. So George Hathaway was actually the guy's name I was thinking. It wasn't George Miley. It was George Hathaway. And,
yeah, I've heard of him. Yep.
Yeah, so he presented at this Space Studies Institute. That's another channel people should go and check out the Space Studies Institute if they want to see what the people are talking about. The other one that was interesting here that I want to mention that you should probably go back and watch would be I'm going to play a key part from it, but Nathan Innan. So he goes over, the outline, and talks about vector GM done correctly. So this naive view of the gem theory, and then the vector gem theory done correctly. So this part is key to understand, and he just dives right in, so it's a little bit tricky because he just goes right into the tensor mechanics, because he says well this whole idea that you use Maxwell's equations and just this view, you need to use tensors as the proper math you need to model this stuff in. And he talks about Einstein-Cartan theory and this GR model with this metric in terms of these gem potentials, and then he explains why this idea is
With this formulation, we conclude that we have gravito-electromagnetism, but as you can see, I'm describing it as naive. And the naivete takes different levels. On the most naive level, we might say, well, there must also be a force equation that's just simply the Lorentz force, but just replace electric and magnetic fields with gravito-electric and gravito-magnetic fields.
right.
Now, notice there's this pesky 4 in there that seems to bug people, because those who write this down without going through the nitty-gritty details expected to see something totally analogous to electromagnetism. Where's this pesky 4 come in? It doesn't appear in electromagnetism. Well, if you want, you can get rid of the 4, but it's going to come back and haunt you. It's going to show up in the field equations. So if you redefine your fields in a particular way, you can get rid of the 4 in this Lorentz force if it's bugging you, but then it's going to appear over here in the field equations. So you can't get rid of it if you're going to do the formulation properly. But that's really just kind of a minor thing compared to more fundamental issues that we have here, which is that it can be shown relatively easy. I won't do it in this talk, but it can be shown relatively easy that in this non-relativistic approximation, there is in fact no Gravito-Faraday law. And I know some of us might kick back at this, but it can be shown very straightforward with the mathematics that this in fact doesn't emerge in the non-relativistic approximation. At least if we're going to say that GR is true, we're in the linear regime, and we're using harmonic gauge, and we have non-relativistic sources. Those are all the things that we had to do to arrive at Maxwell-like equations. If we're going to do them consistently, this guy is gone. And furthermore, another problem is we could say to ourselves, okay, well, if it's in the non-relativistic approximation that we have this issue, let's let our sources be relativistic then. Fine, let's have a more complicated scenario, which is okay. Now, the thing, though, is that this Einstein equation in the harmonic gauge seems to imply that all the degrees of freedom radiate. And in fact, you can show by conservation of momentum that T0I doesn't radiate. And that's because the conservation law in GR is more elaborate than the conservation law in electromagnetism. You've got this extra tensor part of the stress tensor that enforces another conservation law that doesn't appear in electromagnetism. So in electromagnetism, we just have a continuity equation that would relate the analogous quantities for T00 and T0I, which would be the charge density and the charge current. That's it. Continuity equation, you're done. But in GR, you've got this extra TIJ piece that can absorb changes in the momentum. And so as a result, you need to have time changes in the stress to have a radiation occur. So there's this internal conservation law that prohibits vector gravitational waves from coming out. But the formulation seems to imply that they emerge. Now, my best argument as to why this is a mirage, so Lance and I have been working on this, and I love his terminology in that regard. He calls it a mirage, and it really is, because if you go all the way back to the fact that we wrote gravito-electric and gravito-magnetic fields ad hoc, and they are not gauge invariant quantities, you can show that the gauge freedom in fact involves these C quantities. Remember, they were the gauge generators or linear or coordinate transformations, which means if you kind of look at this closely, you might notice that's an acceleration. It shouldn't surprise us, because it basically says that if you go into an accelerating coordinate frame, you can make the apparent gravito-electric field vanish. And if you go into this kind of like circular solenoidal type coordinate frame that involves the curl of C, you can make your gravito-magnetic field vanish. So that already alerts us that there's a problem. So the waves that emerge obviously are questionable, because you can make them disappear by what we call sometimes residual gauge freedom that still exists. Because the harmonic gauge, yes, it did fix the gauge well enough for us to write down the field equations and remove 4 degrees of freedom, or if you wish, introduce 4 constraints, but there's a residual gauge freedom on C that I didn't bother showing because it's too much nitty-gritty for our talk. There's a remaining gauge freedom, and that's the terminology Misner, Thorne, and Wheeler use in their book. They call it residual. It's left over, and if you don't pay attention, you won't realize that in fact it's still gauge freedom. So with all that said, I'd like to point out where this became an issue in the research I was doing with Raymond Chow, which is that his previous papers with Steve Mentor used this metric here and used gravito-electromagnetic fields to describe gravitational waves. But as I just discussed, that's a problem because there are no vector gravitational waves. In fact, if you look at any standard textbook, you'll find that gravitational waves, in fact, really exist in the central 2x2 here, and often referred to as plus polarization and cross polarization fields for the two polarizations that gravitational waves have. And so there's a clear contradiction here between these two metrics. Something's not right if we're going to say that either of them can apply. And that's why I said the first ingredient when you're going to cook in the kitchen of GR is what your metric is. And so clearly there's a problem here in trying to describe gravitational waves when these two metrics aren't consistent with each other. So notice that some properties of the TT gauge is that, as I said, you've got this plus polarization and cross polarization fields. Notice some important features. It's traceless. See, if I add those diagonals, they're gone. And of course, the off diagonals don't affect the trace. So it is traceless, and it's also transverse. You can show that the derivative, the forward derivative of this vector here is 0. And that's because gravitational waves are transverse waves. There's no longitudinal degrees of freedom. And then they are traceless because they propagate in vacuum even in the absence of any matter. So we've got the TT gauge metric, and we can show, in fact, I don't know if you've noticed that the Einstein equation that we wrote down in linear.
I'm not going to have him get into this. I wanted to show that point about the non-radiative fields with this rotating disk and some of the math involved. But this, he goes through like the different things that they tried to correct this and make it consistent with Maxwell's equations and stuff. But let me just find the.
Can I come in quickly if you don't mind?
Superconductors and gravitational drag, and this is a picture of Kip Thorne. A number of these other guys who are involved in a lot of this stuff. But he goes into this superconductors and gravitational drag, correction to do with Hamiltonian, expansion of the Hamiltonian, this gravitational like effect. How can we make like a superconductor expels the magnetic field, right? How do we make a gravity thing that expels the gravitational field, right?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of concepts that you just have you have to get to the bench and actually build this stuff. You have to experiment, and that's why everything I talk about, the stuff I do, I've actually built. So experimentation is a huge thing. Doing the math and doing all the engineering on a computer is one thing, but you actually have to sit down and actually build this stuff and actually try to make a prototype of your concept. And that will give you a definite, what's happening if you're onto something or you're not onto something. So I'm a real big thing on, building the stuff. Experiment. Well,
then we get these experiments, and then they come out with these other experiments saying that, oh, your experiment doesn't work, and we tried it and it didn't work. And there's this battle that goes back and forth. Like
sure,
we saw that would happen with cold fusion, and then these guys from MIT. I went to the colloquium and some of the stuff in 2014, and they were saying that this 94% saturation rate is
they were intentionally doing it wrong to get it debunked, though, right?
They were intentionally doing it wrong.
Today, a silent majority can no longer be silenced and censored. We're connecting. We all know the truth. We all know it's possible, and we're all
people are trying this at least
of our own experiments and what the results are, and that It's real, and we're coming together. It's a beautiful thing, and it's just week by week. We build a little more, we learn a little more.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
collaboration. You have to collaborate with other people to get ideas, and sometimes somebody is going to say something that's going to make something click, for your experiments, and that could be the solution. So, it's good that everybody's collaborating like this. Now we have the power of the internet to do it. You can collaborate with people on the other side of the planet, and it's a good thing.
Actually, I wanted to tell you about one of the prototypes that we developed.
It says that this is where the MIT experiments were on cold fusion, down here where nothing would have
Guys,
gotten.
can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm just wanting to point this out. And then 94% is where they got a peak in the excess heat for the saturation rates. And yeah, so there's a lot of interesting stuff I learned from going to the MIT open course colloquium on cold fusion.
See, that's the problem
awesome.
with it.
I'm jealous.
Like when you have these institutions and they try to, create these cold fusion experiments and they come with such poor results, it's like,
there's different people at the institution though that did those things. It's like you have to understand the motivations of those individuals that did that research, that early research, which was like more like a witch hunt, versus guys like Peter Hagelstein that took up this research 15 years ago, and they've been just quietly plugging away.
That's right. And sometimes that's the best way of going about it. Keep it secret for a while until it's something feasible, right? But a lot of people have really lost faith in the American Patent Office and the way they suppress certain things. Like there's as far as I know, there's been over 2,000 different over Unity devices that have been botched, and some of them actually seized by the U.S. government. And
even that worked.
That work, right? And they would seize them.
See that. Yeah, this is my challenge though to people that make these claims. It's like, bring one down we're going to be next week, next Saturday. Bring it down and show it off and show people how to do it.
Mike, can you show yours right now, brother?
Oh, I got nothing set up right now. I got nothing set up, but
come down to our lab. We're experts in measuring energy, and we can.
You come up to Canada, eh?
Yeah.
Maybe I will this winter. I'll put my snow boots on and get my snowmobile.
That's right. Get your fishing rod ready.
Yeah, and my ice auger, my ice auger. Right.
But irregardless, as me as an experimenter and stuff, I get, I have my share of haters. And they say, oh, you don't know this, and you don't know this, and this, and this. But you know what? Okay, if you're that great, and I look these people up, and they got no videos, no nothing to show for. And I got over 40 videos of stuff that I've actually built. You know what I mean? And they can badmouth you day in and day out. And these guys are writing 3-page essays, trying to badmouth me. And it's like, okay, do you really have that much time on your hands? Maybe you should.
Their breakdown of reality, Mike. That's what it is. It's
it's
not possible. My world can't exist if what you're saying is true.
Exactly. It's I just try to push that side.
Was it dogma, or is it do you actually they trying to educate you on stuff? And
some of the stuff is very valid, but they get really nasty. I'm supposed to know this stuff. I'm an aerospace machinist, right? I'm working with something that's totally out of my comfort zone. I never grew up as an electrician or an electrical engineer. This is stuff I've learned on my own personal learning. I never went to college or university for this. I started right from the beginning, bare bones. I knew nothing. And I've learned so much. I've educated myself. And, when I started making it, I was kind of a skeptic too when I first started, to be honest. And I said, okay, I'm going to build this stuff. I'm going to build, exactly plans that people say that work. So I started building this stuff, and then I realized it works. kind of helps with the credibility a little bit. So I started to go on, and I'm building this stuff, and it's working. It's working. I can see it for myself in front of me. So I went in with no dogmatic, intentions or prejudices or anything of the sort. I went, I got plans, I put it together, and it works. And that's kind of what fueled me to go further and explore new areas, right? And that's how I started. So when you see it in front of you working, and a guy makes a certain claim about it, you build it exactly the way he built it, you're getting the same effects. It kind of helps with the credibility. So, I just carry on and started educating myself, and, one thing leads to another, and, that's how I did it anyway. You got to go in with a non-biased approach, right?
I just wanted to come in on one of the projects. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, man, butt in at any time, man. I just want to read a quick super chat from Morgan Nowlin. How much money would it cost to get Elon Musk to see a preview of the value of live chats like these? We build a little more, we learn a little more. Yeah, that'd be great to get. I know that they've been doing a lot of stuff on like Clubhouse with some of these people. I don't know if Elon's done any of, but yeah.
Like, Elon Musk is, he was more of a software guy. When it comes to like the engineering of, his cars and SpaceX and stuff like that, there's so many people behind him that are doing all this stuff. So yeah, he's like, best way I can describe it, he's a modern day Edison. Edison started, inventing stuff. He had very little education. With him, he was more of the trial and error approach, and it worked for him. But he had the business mind to make it work and sell his patents, and that's how he became famous. Where Tesla, he was a genius in his own right, but he was an idiosyncratic type genius. He was very naive when it came to the business end of it. That's why he died a poor man, because he got screwed so many times because he wasn't good with the business part. He was a very eccentric inventor, but when it came to business, he was lost, completely lost. That's where Edison was actually more of a successful inventor than Tesla was. Tesla, I think, was more of a genius, but Edison was more of the business smarts.
Well, he ran an industry and just filed patents and had a whole bunch of people like working under him that he just
That's right.
took ideas.
And same thing with Elon Musk. He's doing the same thing. He's got a lot of talented engineers working under him. He's the front man of the business, right? Everybody knows who he is. He's the richest, probably the richest guy on the planet right now.
Yeah.
He's got the business sense. He went to the University of Toronto for quite a few years, him and his brother. So he's actually a Toronto native. So
they build damn nice cars.
Yep, they do.
Yeah, so I don't know. There's a lot of stuff to dive into here. It's enough homework for. I mean, this is like I've given enough leads here tonight, I think, to.
Yeah, for sure. Like I'm
damn
always,
nice cars that catch on fire. I emailed Tim about getting Mike on the next Apec, or if not next week, 3 weeks from now, so he can be more prepared and do full demonstrations of his Don Smith's double spark gap generator over Unity device.
Yep, you could always see my experiments on my YouTube channel.
Oh,
so
I will be posting in the live chat right now a link to your channel, Mike.
Yeah, cool. Yep, I'm always online. I do about 2 to 3 videos a week, and I try to keep the channel fresh. My Patreon's working now. I'm going to be doing some exclusive content for that. Doing schematics, doing builds and stuff like that for my Patreon. So yeah, there's I'm starting to evolve, right? Like I've got over 700 subscribers to the channel now. Took a long time, over 2 years to get there, but you know, slowly but surely, being persistent and posting
I
videos.
didn't help at all with shilling the shit out of you.
Of course, you're a huge part of it. But that's the thing with these communities. When they join together and they collaborate together, everybody is going to succeed, right? That's what it's all about, really. Joining forces.
Heck yeah. Well, yeah, I'm thank you guys for adding to the discussion here tonight. What do you think about Seth? Do you think UAPs are worthy of scientific inquiry?
For sure. I personally think they're ours. A lot of it. Some of it could be legit alien encounters, but I think there's been a lot of stuff hidden behind closed doors for many years. And it'll take an act of God for them to actually reveal the stuff. You know, Area 51, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, you know, all these places where they're hiding the stuff. And obviously, they were given a very, very large kickstart to this technology. I don't think they were able to do this on their own. I think, you know, there definitely was an ET encounter, and they recovered some tech, and they've been under research and development for the last 50 years. I think the biggest hurdle for us was the metamaterials. You know, you got to have the
Well, the
materials.
metallurgy and
Yes,
all that stuff too.
Yeah, exactly. You know,
We
the
didn't really
fuel.
understand the science of
And-
what was going on in it, or how
And
to build
how
it.
much of the ancient stuff's metallurgy can we not even reproduce today? Like there's so many like part different like steels that haven't rusted in like 3,000 years, or like are monopolar, and it's ridiculous. Like,
Yeah, it's like taking a piece of plastic and giving it to an ancient Egyptian to look at it and go, "Well, this is cool, but how do we make it?" So we're in the same situation now with the alien tech that's been recovered, and we're looking at it and we're going, "Well, this is cool, but how do we make it?" So, you know, this is going to take time to develop these materials. Some of these materials might not even be available on the planet. That's also a definite possibility. So, you know, there's a lot of elements, a lot of alloys and steels that they use. Yeah, it's just it's going to take time. But the problem is the military-industrial complex has been suppressing all this information for over 50 years, probably longer. And it'll take an act of God that, you know, this stuff is going to get out into the mainstream. Some stuff probably has come out, you know, fiber optics and the microchip and lasers and stuff like that. That could very well have been from that technology that was recovered, you know, 60 years ago. So, you know,
Yeah, I thought that was interesting that we have another witness coming forward about this metamaterial. I know I've heard like a lot of this audio and stuff before from people that were connected to this. And there's a number of investigations that were done into this. One of the guys that that's name comes up, and who might be someone worth, you know, trying to get a hold of. I don't know. We got to start like someone out in the community needs to be like the Project Veritas, like, you know, underground, just record these people in conversations, because we kind of know the people, or we've identified the people in the community who should have access. And, you know, because a lot of times they keep it within the family, like the son takes over the research, you know, and the father did, right? And then we hear that time and time again. It's like they like to keep it within the family, like, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's what suppressed the information for so long. And
One of the guys that's been pointed out or identified is this guy named Knox Millsaps, and his father was actually one of the scientists involved with Wright-Patterson, who would have had access to the Roswell material.
Mhm.
And he's the current like director of aerospace sciences, and I mean, just look at his resume if you check him out. But he's apparently been identified as the guy from the naval research labs. You know, he's connected to all the same places. Office of Naval Research. You know, apparently the Navy's been in possession of these types of things too. You know, there was
Oh yeah, Navy especially, because if you think about it, the oceans are the vast area of space, so they would naturally be first on scene to collect a lot of things, and they have more radar stations than anybody.
So a couple of artifacts like this have been found, and this is an actual 1940s CIC document that shows chain of custody. This material was from a UFO encounter. So UFO debris from Denmark. I think this was. It says 47, but I believe the Denmark case was 52, and it was I forget the name of the project that they were.
So that
but,
could technically be leftover super Nazi stuff, or alien, or
no,
interdimensional, could be anything, right?
They followed this UFO, and then it stopped over this island near Denmark, and then it dropped out this metal ingot, and then it took off like an incredible speed. And they
Oh yes, I remember. I've seen that case. Yeah, I've seen it on one of the tech shows. Yeah.
So this is why UAP might be scientifically interesting. This is material that's been recovered that we don't have access to, that we don't know about, and
materials is everything.
Apparently, they take some kind of raw ore or raw material and they burn it up with cold fusion effects, maybe radiative. They somehow extract energy from this.
It's probably electrical plasma. There's an effect that happens, kind of with my spark gap. If you put certain materials within my spark gap, that seems to enhance the effect. I'm noticing like transformations happening because I'm using like galvanized steel for my contacts, and it's actually changing the properties of the metal.
Yep.
And there's something to it. I think alien tech, when they're making these materials, they're using plasma energy to
all about the
create this stuff.
plasma and the plasma field. And
I think it's a form of cold fusion. Like they must be like they burn up a lot of the metal and turns it into another metal. I think that these things.
It is cold fusion plasma.
Weren't these things analyzed? Didn't they have a piece of this Bob White artifact that was like the same like a more modern day one, and it's a much better condition. You'll find this one if you look it up. So this Bob White UFO artifact was, it shows these structures very similar to what we see in these exotic vacuum objects, EVOs. And that's
what I've been doing with the spark gap. I had one of my followers kind of tip me off on this EVO stuff. So the one guy that was working on this stuff was Kenneth Shoulders.
Ken Shoulders,
Ken Shoulders, and he was also collaborating a lot with John Hutchison at the time.
Yep.
And I've seen some interviews with them. So I think if you're using a certain frequency through a spark gap, you can actually create these EVOs. Now, the effects of that will actually increase in the vacuum.
I believe it's more about the emitter and the wave resonance and the packaging. Because remember, I showed that video with the
You're
wave.
speaking the exact same thing, but in two different languages.
So the flow wave. Remember the video I showed earlier with the pool, right? So this flow spike. If you the way that they generate this this spike wave, and if you create spike waves, you're going to have all kinds of breakdown. You could have fusion reactions occur because what you do to the Hamiltonian at that point in space-time, if you've got an object that's sitting here and this is your electromagnetic field, right? Sorry.
Yep.
Let's show this one, right? Say you have an object sitting here and this is your electromagnetic field,
Right.
This is a 90-foot spike they generated in this wave pool by just getting these concentric wings to all meet in the center and create a singularity at that point.
Right. And that's when you get the massive increase in power. And that's what I noticed. That's what I noticed on my spark Apec experiments last night. I hit a certain frequency and the thing would just jump through the roof.
So apparently what's going on in these metals that are being, torn apart and restructured and organized, and then they burn them up as fuel and then they dump them. So that Bob White artifact, again, these structures, if you look at those under an SEM, these are little sites where these things were burned up or turned into fuel. So again, why is it shaped like a spike?
That is a good point. Energy going down to a focal point. It's a cone, right? It's the going into the infinity of nothing. The entropeutic force, as Dan Winters calls it. But it's the focal point, right? Going into the counter space where it ends.
Did they do an analysis on this? Because I'd like to find, let's see, Bob White artifact spectrograph.
Is it a part of a UFO or it's just?
This is not a part of a UFO. This is like we believe it's like the fuel that they use, and that when it's exhausted, it drops these things. It drops these strange shaped ingots because it's not actually like, oh, a piece of the UFO fell off.
Mm-hmm.
I've never in my life taken a poop that looks like that.
Hey, what do you know what an alien's turd looks like? That kind of looks like a fossilized dino turd, doesn't it?
Very strange thing to come out of your, porthole.
Ooh.
Most of the UFO cases are USO cases. The majority of them. I was listening to Michael Schratt's one of the documentaries, and he was talking about the majority of the cases were USOs. I feel that I don't know whether they're aliens or this thing, but something has to do with the ocean. I always feel that because so many cases where of these under submerged objects that we've been seeing, and including this Tic Tac apparently was hovering above something. So
it's a perfect hiding place.
Yeah, Mike, I had a question for you.
Sure.
You were discussing about the anti-gravity based effect on a fly wing principle,
right,
which we were talking before. I just wanted to give you a heads up on the project that we are doing. So what we're doing is we rather than using a flywheel, we have created a spear. Okay.
Right.
And we have injected the spear with a high quality mercury. Okay. Now this spear is enclosed with neodymium magnets, circumference of neodymium magnets.
Right.
And a high dose, and basically the entire spear spins at about 9,500 to 15,000 RPM.
Okay.
And an electricity voltage of more than 2,000 to 3,000 volts is injected through the spherical ball.
Right.
Okay. What we have seen is it produces a lift. It produces within the area. It produces a positive and a negative effect, where we get a positive lift, which is non-controllable. You cannot control it.
Right.
But as it spins much faster and faster, you can just remove the voltage supply, and it
sustains itself.
It sustains itself for about 2.5 minutes before the engine explodes.
Mm.
So we're doing this experiment in India right now in a startup company that we have called Ocres Solutions. So
quick question for you: the magnetic field. Are you injecting the magnetic field, or is the neodymiums inside the sphere?
So neodymiums are inside the sphere, and within the neodymium are the flow of mercury liquid. What happens is when you when it starts spinning for about 9,500 RPM to 10,000, the mercury spreads across the circumference of the sphere,
Right.
and it's producing a very ominous hue of, let's say, plasma, something
Right.
like plasma effect. It actually floated about 10 to 20 feet above the ground, but it's
Where really?
Yep, I can send you the video. I'm gonna put it in the WhatsApp, or I can send it to you by your email. I think in your
Yes,
YouTube channel.
yes, spyman911911@gmail.com.
Yeah, I'll send
Yeah,
you the video, and that's what we're working on in India right now.
yeah,
We're trying to
that's
figure
cool.
out what kind of material can sustain that engine. So we're figuring out, and we're looking into a lot of theories to see whether it's actual anti-gravity or is just ion effects.
Sorry
Well,
to interrupt. Have you been able to create a counter-rotating vortex within
Yeah.
the outer vortex, like two
Yeah.
separate rotating fields of mercury within themselves?
No, so we did try a prototype which rotated counterclockwise and clockwise, but we could not produce much of the lift. So that lift was
Okay.
probably about 6 grams.
So the device that you worked on right now that gave you that effect, what direction was the sphere spinning? Clockwise or counterclockwise?
Counterclockwise.
Okay, good. Yep.
So counterclockwise, and what we did is we created a second prototype, and we attached servos on each side of the polarity of the sphere to see if we could manipulate the energy that is coming out of the sphere to have a directional rotation.
Right.
So that means even if the sphere is rotating counterclockwise, you can focus the energy either left or center within the axis to for the orientation.
Okay, so what I see you've done, you've actually created the engine. So you got to build a craft around this device, okay? And then what you're going to do is you have to use waveguides. If you can direct that energy in a certain direction, there's a way that you can put a waveguide in there, you might be able to manipulate it easier. Now, if it's going to be on the outside or inside the sphere, that would have to be experimentation to figure that out. But
Yeah,
if it's going in longitudinal waves, what I'm thinking, it will be very easy to put a waveguide on the outside where the field is being generated. And if you can direct it that way, I'm pretty sure you'll be able to manipulate the waves.
yeah. So we're trying to build the next engine. I'm gonna submit a paper in the next coming weeks in the WhatsApp group. I think I've just joined in the Apex WhatsApp group. Gonna submit the paper on the result of finding whether it's an anti-gravity or an ion engine, and then we're planning to build a craft around it, any shape or this thing, to see whether we can control the craft for a significant amount of time, let's say 10 minutes or 20 minutes. If that happens, I think we're onto something.
See, I think honestly, the ions that you're referring to, I think they're almost similar to what the electrons are in an electric circuit. It is the resistance. So through the gravitational waves, you're going to have matter. Okay, it could be ions, it could be matter coming from the sun, it could be radiation, it could be anything. But the fact is that you proved that you're able to manipulate and get that sphere off the ground. You're counteracting forces of gravity. You were able to either deflect it in a certain direction or actually physically neutralize it. So if you're neutralizing that effect, yes, you definitely could be very onto something there. I would definitely pursue this.
Yes, absolutely, and that's the reason I want to present in Apex. Once the second prototype is ready, I want to take a video of it and present that with the papers of the findings that we have done, and then I think I think Jeremy can look into developing one.
How big is the sphere?
16 centimeters in diameter.
16 centimeters. Okay.
Yeah, with 6 microservos outside, cobalt neodymium magnet, which we had to custom get it done from the manufacturer, and then
What is the shape of the magnet?
It's it's cube,
It's a
smaller
cube.
cubes. Yeah,
Okay.
smaller cubes, but they're glued inside to using industrial glues.
Okay.
So they're not all the way around the sphere, but as it comes to the top section of the sphere, there is a cutout opening there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The one thing that I was, just a quick one last question. The tic tac, which is a very interesting thing when I've heard about that, it there was a kind of a protruding kind of an antenna or something for the tic tac. And if you look at Michael Schratt's description of various UFO sighting documentaries, there were a lot of UFOs that had these kind of protrusions outside.
Right.
Whether it is for releasing energy or to capture energy, that is something. It's very confusing. I'm still thinking about. What do you think about it?
I think it'd be some way of a waveguide. Could actually be a waveguide.
Yeah.
So that's just a guess, but yeah, I would say it would be some form of a waveguide.
I think you're right, Mike, and it's about
Looks like
getting the energy out of it when you're pulsing it without interrupting the field of the dipole, right?
Maybe.
Does that make sense or no?
Yeah. You would definitely have need a waveguide, right? Because if it's going in every direction all around the sphere, basically it wouldn't go anywhere. It would just sit there in space.
Right.
It wouldn't
the
move.
waveguide is what gives it that one little push cancellation out of every other force.
Well, you're going to have the effect stronger on one side of the sphere over the other, so therefore it's going to be drawn in the direction of the stronger of the field. So yeah, definitely waveguide, I think, is definitely a very, very big part of this, because I really believe gravity is a wave, very similar to kind of like I guess you could say like a microwave, but with different properties. Now, I've been digging on that stuff too, and one guy was saying the frequency of the gravity wave is 2.6 million hertz. Now, I don't know if there's any credible evidence of such a frequency, but if gravity neutralizes under such a frequency and your sphere is generating this 2.6 million hertz, that's why you're getting the cancellation of mass, and that's why it's lifting off the ground.
Is there this thing, I've heard about this. There's a positive gravity and there's a negative gravity.
Yeah, I believe magnetism is definitely one of the components of gravity. It really is. It's like electricity. You have to have electromagnetism and you have to have dielectricity. Without either one, you cannot get electricity. I think gravitational forces, I think magnetism is definitely one critical component of that.
As well as rotational spin, inertia, and buoyancy.
It's kinetic. Gravity is kinetic.
Well, I like the there was a documentary that used to be on gravity, and it showed like the ocean, and you put the two ships in the thing, and they create the random waves, and the two ships will eventually like go together and touch each other, just because of the random wave motion. And that's why I like that Unruh radiation bath kind of model of gravity. And you saw that like disappear from the discussion. It's like, no, that's not how gravity works, and don't talk about that anymore. It's like, no, I think we were onto something there.
See, but, like it's kind of like the same scenario I was saying. I try to come up with a very easy metaphorical idea. It's like when you go dive into a swimming pool and you go right to the very bottom of 10 feet, you're feeling all the forces of the water on every part of your body. Okay, I think gravity does the similar thing, but at a very lot less of a potential. But because of the speed of the gravitational waves hitting the large body that we sit on the Earth, the closer you get to a large body, that gravitational effects increase. That's why if you go up in a plane 100,000 feet, you start to get lighter, because the effects of those waves is less as you get further from the body or mass that you're on. So that would explain why, you get up to 85, 100,000 feet, you start to feel that weightlessness starting.
Hmm. Also, I was also looking into, Alcubierre drive, which, the paper by Alcubierre himself about the anti-gravity propulsion system for light speed travel. If you look at the formula where he has, projected the amount of power that is required, it's so huge. I mean, it's mind blowing the amount of power that it requires for that craft even to kickstart. So
I'm going to. I have to read this super chat, guys. And he wants the plasma laser so he can get the gold member from Austin Powers. Yeah, that's pretty silly. I think if you tried to do that, it wouldn't turn out so well for you. But anyways, yeah. I think the squeeze coherent states it has something to do with it for these mass negative energy generation schemes, and also breaking that linearities in the quantum vacuum with that stuff. Thank you for all the super chats kindly tonight, Harry Toe, everyone who helped contribute in the super chats, and thank you so much. I'm gonna call it a good night. It's been 2.5 hours almost talking about aliens. This is not the conversation I would have had with Seth Showstock if we can get on that original thing I showed. The SETI. This conference is coming up, guys. It's actually register now. Go on there and register. It's Wednesday, November 17th, 2021, and it starts I think like 11. It starts pretty late at Eastern Standard Time. But it's online, and guys, it's free registration. Just go on there and pre-register now, and that way we can interject and in any live chat or whatever. We can dominate this conference with real information and stuff, and start giving them stuff that they should look at. I don't want to like overload them too much with just too much crap.
That's why we need the team of everybody in the live chat to join and partake with us.
Yeah. Cut a lot of this stuff. You don't need a credit card, man. I just signed up for free. I just put my name and my email. That's all it took, dude. I didn't have to have a credit card. It was free.
I've got one last question for you, Jeremy, and it has to do with plasma fields and the fluorescent lighting, and how does the energy travel through one glass, through the air, through another sealed glass, and then still ionize what is inside. And it's in a burnt out tube too. Like this bulb won't even work if you hook it up to a proper space for.
Yeah, so the idea is that the Tesla coil is a resonant electromagnetic field coil. So you're creating fields in the air.
Right.
And what's happening is that those particles are still, because that tube's not broken, you still got the gas inside there. What happens is that
how's it traveling through that tube, through this glass and through this glass?
Because glass is a dielectric, man. Because glass is a dielectric. It's like it's kind of like an insulator, but it's clear to certain frequencies, right? Like it's clear. Glass is clear to your eyes. How does the light go through the glass? It goes through the glass perfectly.
Very good point.
Yeah, glass is probably one of the best dielectrics other than acrylic.
Yeah.
Now, in the last couple of weeks, I did some research on PLA plastic that used for 3D printing, and it turns out 3D printer plastic, the PLA, has for every millimeter has 30 kilovolt dielectricity properties to it, which makes it very good for a dielectric.
If you wrap it in tinfoil, it won't work.
No, it doesn't. No.
So this is why you're safe inside of your car
Tin
because it's
hat.
metal, or you're safe inside of a metal frame airframe in a metal airplane, so that that will insulate you from the electromagnetic fields. But if
Right.
you had a plane that was made out of insulator, and like say it was plastic bodied plane, and
Oh, God.
fiberglass instead of metal, right? And you got shocked by a lightning bolt.
Oh, you're dead.
Well, you'd look like the inside of that plasma tube.
When are we gonna make you some shirts, my man?
You'd be fluorescing. Yeah. So this is basic physics, and it's fascinating stuff, and it's
I've got a
definitely.
quick question, if I can come in.
Yeah, go for it, man.
Mike, this is for you. Can you just send your mail ID in the private chat? So I
Yeah,
can
Mike, where can people find
contact
you, and pump your website and where people can find you, dude?
Sure. Yeah, you check me on YouTube. It's Faraday Research R&D, and I got all my videos there. And I also have my link there for the Patreon page, so you can check out my Patreon. And in those videos on that site there, I'll be doing like builds and stuff like that, how to build pulse motors and spark gaps, and I get more in depth on the actual builds. On my regular shows that are my videos that I do on the YouTube, I still give a lot of information and I correspond with a lot of people every day. Getting a lot of great feedback on that. So that's never going to stop. They'll always be there.
You will straight address the haters and the lovers the same. You put up your blueprints and your schematics for everyone to see, and you're open to it. And Mike usually comes on my podcast, Weekend at Burn Eyes, once a week, and we give a breakdown of it.
Cool.
So there's Mike's channel right there, guys. Go.
No, that one's mine. I'm gonna post
that's
Mike's
your
again.
channel.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, post Mike's channel. Everyone, so everyone can go there and tell him why he's a dumbass, but do it nicely. And yeah, hopefully we can improve ourselves, and constructive criticism also always helps, man. We never.
No, it does. It does help. And I always take everybody's ideas into consideration, irregardless if I like how the person is actually presented it to me or not. There's so much information. Like I'm collaborating with so many people now. It's like almost a full-time job now.
Well, as we have to learn from science, the faulty of pursuit of epicycles. We often, the more complicated and mathematical answers aren't always the correct ones.
No, it's experimentation.
So yeah, we got to have a good mix of that on this channel, and I try to bring that from the theory and the experiment, and cross those two. So yeah, guys, thank you for tuning in to Alien Scientists tonight. Go check out Mike at Faraday Research. Thank you, Mike. I'm gonna put you in the back room, and we're gonna open this up in a second. Bernard, thank you too for the demonstration and the cool background and art as always, man.
Much love, my friends.
Definitely got to get. Let's talk on some t-shirts and some artwork and a whole bunch of that stuff. So stay tuned. I'm gonna put you in the back room. We'll and Mikhail, thank you too for
thank you
for your questions and contributions. And guys, the live stream is going to end now. Here's the StreamYard link for anyone that wants to join the Saturday night after party. Thank you all for watching, and be sure to tune in to Apec next the 13th, and then this on the Wednesday following that. All right, guys.